Hello everyone. Today we're going to discuss a topic about World War One, and that's not that much popular topic to be honest as a World War Two, but it's still a very important part of the European history. And this war, technically, we can think because of unresolved problems of World War Two, we have in our history World War Two, and that's a very important to know the facts about World War One, why it happened, and we need to know the history of it because if you know if you're not even from Europe, it's affected on the whole Earth definitely, yeah. And this war just been from 1914 to 1918, and it was fought between two coalitions, the Allied powers and the Central powers. And on the Wikipedia says that some parts of war even been on the Middle East, Africa, the Pacific, and some parts of Asia, but mostly it's been in Europe. Yeah. To be honest, historians can't name the um, actual reason. They have like a few propositions about it, but it just their thoughts. Probably the most realistic one that the countries they just wanted to have more lands and control more territories, and like we know that mostly that's the main reason to start the war. And but um, some historic says that's the reason of this war was a killing of like a politician. Uh, so the first decade of 20th century saw increasing diplomatic tension between the European great powers, and this reached a breaking point on 28th June 1914 when a Bosnian Serb named Gavrilo Princip assassinated Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne. Yeah. So some people, like, I mean, some historians think that that was the main reason of the World War One. But to be honest, before this conflict, they have a few local fights, and as I said before, probably the main reason is just wanting more power, more lands. Yeah. And Austria-Hungary Empire held Serbia responsible and declared war on 28th July. Russia came to Serbia's defense, and by 4th August, Germany, France, and Britain were drawn into the war, with the Ottoman Empire joining in November of that same year. So, um, first of all, Germany's strategy was to defeat France, then transfer forces to the Russian front. However, it was failed, yeah. And the Western Front considered of continuous line of trenches stretching from the English Channel to Switzerland. The Eastern Front was more dynamic, but neither side could gain a decisive advantage despite costly offensives, as the war expanded to more fronts. Bulgaria, Romania, Greece, Italy, and Austria joined in from 1915 onward. In early 1917s, the United States entered the war. Yeah. On the side of the Allies, and later the same year, the Bolsheviks seized power in the Russian October Revolution. Yeah, so we're going to talk about more in this. So, technically, Russia like lost the World War One because they just left it, and they had the October. It's called October Revolution in 1917s, when his like head of government Petro the First just queued his government because of protests, and then there came as a government. It was called like a temporary government, and they had quite they've been quite like weak, and they couldn't control some territories that had been occupied by Russian Empire, and they lost them, and they just couldn't be involved in World War One a lot because of what happened in their country. And after that, Bolsheviks. That's so you can sometimes you can find on the internet that they've been called like a red power. Because after this temporary government in Russia, they had a white power and a red power, and they were fighting to get control of the whole Russian Empire. And white they lost, and red they win. So reds, they are Bolsheviks, that's right. And after they are taking control of the government, they start to be more involved in World War One. And they making a peace with the Central Powers in early 1918s. That's by the end of war. World War One. And Germany launched an offensive in the West in March 1918, and despite initial success, it left the German army exhausted and demoralized. A successful Allied counter-offensive later than the year caused a collapse of the German front line. By the end of 1918, Bulgaria, the Ottoman Empire, and Austria-Hungary agreed to armistices with the Allies, leaving Germany isolated. Facing revolution at home and with his army on the verge of mutiny, Kaiser Wilhelm II abdicated on 9th November. So the whole fighting ended with the armistice of 11th November 1918, with a subsequent Paris Peace Conference imposed various settlements on the defeated powers, notably the Treaty of Versailles, the dissolution of the Russian, German, Austro-Hungarian, and Ottoman empires, resulted in the creation of new independent states, including Poland, Finland, Czechoslovakia. Now it's currently, it's as a two separate countries, Czech Republic and Slovakia, and Yugoslavia. That's a country do not exist anymore. The inability to manage post-war instability contributed to the outbreak of World War II in September 1939. Yes, that's what I said before, and as you can see it on this Wikipedia article, most of the problems just were unresolved, and these fights for lands were unresolved, and I think one of the problems were, and that they just isolated Germany. That was a big, huge mistake, because after that they got a new government that they became a Nazi, and they wanted to have a power. They want to be a power of Europe, power of world. They wanted to have their nation on the top, and after this World War One, Germany was like in the misery. The country was poor. It was hard to survive to people, and also during this these battles, they had a massive problem with the thief, and lots of illnesses, like kind of AIDS, but not really. When people just couldn't survive because of poor medicine, and this killed about typhus. I think it should be called typhus, and it killed about like up to 10 million people, just civilians, because they just couldn't survive in these horrible conditions, world war times, World War times. But you need to know the fact that during 1914s and 1918s, and just before the start of World War II, they didn't know that this war would be named World War II. They just called it World War, just without a number. Yeah, and so let's talk about political and military alliances that's been involved in this war. For much of the 19th century, the major European powers maintained a tenacious balance of power among themselves, known as concern of Europe. After 1848, this war challenged by a variety of factors, including Britain's withdrawal into so-called splendid isolation, the decline of the Ottoman Empire, new imperialism, and the rise of Prussia under Otto von Bismarck. Prussia is currently, that's a German, yeah. The 1866 Austro-Prussian War established Prussian hegemony in German states, while victory in the 1870s to 1871 Franco-Prussian War allowed Bismarck to consolidate the German states into a German empire under Prussian leadership. Avenging the defeat of 1871 of revanchism and recovering the provinces of Alsace-Lorraine became the principal object of French policy for the next 40 years. In order to isolate France and avoid a war on two fronts, Bismarck negotiated the League of the Three Emperors between Austria-Hungary, Russia, and Germany. After Russian victory in the 1977 to 1878 Russia-Turkish War, the League was dissolved due to Austrian concerns over Russian influence in the Balkans, an area they considered of vital strategic interest. Germany and Austria-Hungary formed the 1879 Dual Alliance, which became the Triple Alliance when Italy joined in 1882. For Bismarck, the purpose of these agreements was to isolate France by ensuring the three empires resolved any disputes between themselves. When this war threatened in 1818 by British and French attempts to negotiate directly with Russia, he reformed the League in 1881, which was renewed in 1883 and 1885. After the agreement lapsed in 1887, he replaced it with the Reinsurance Treaty, a secret agreement between Germany and Russia to remain neutral if either were attacked by France or Austria-Hungary. And Bismarck viewed peace with Russia as a foundation of German foreign policy after becoming Kaiser in 1890. Wilhelm II forced him to retire and was persuaded not to renew the Reinsurance Treaty by his new Chancellor Leo von Caprivi. This provided France an opportunity to counter-attack the Triple Alliance by signing the Franco-Russian Alliance in 1894, followed by the 1904 Entente Cordiale with Britain. The Triple Entente was completed by the 1907 Anglo-Russian Convention. While these were not formal alliances, by settling long-standing colonial disputes in Africa and Asia, the notion of British entry and into any future conflict involving France or Russia became a possibility. British and Russian support for France against Germany during the Agadir crisis in 1911 reinforced their relationship and increased Anglo-German estrangement, depending on the divisions that would erupt in 1914. So a few words about the arms race. German industrial strength and production significantly increased after 1871, driven by the creation of Infantry and French indemnity payments and the annexion of Alsace-Lorraine. backed by Wilhelm II. Admiral Alfred von Tirpitz sought to use this growth in economic power to build a Kaltschirch Marine or Imperial German Navy, which could compete with the British Royal Navy for the world naval supremacy. His thinking was influenced by US naval strategist Alfred Thayer Mahan, who argued possession of blue water navy was vital for global power projection, and Tirpitz had his books translated into German, while Wilhelm made them required reading for his advisors and senior military personnel. However, it was also an emotional decision driven by Wilhelm's simultaneous admiration for the Royal Navy, which British one, and desire to outdo and surpass it. Bismarck thought that the British would not interfere in Europe so long as the maritime supremacy remained secure, but his dismissal in 1819 led to a change in policy and an Anglo-German naval arms race began. Despite the vast sums spent by Tirpitz, the launch of HMS Dreadnought in 1906 gave the British a technological advantage over their German rivals, which they never lost. Ultimately, the race diverted huge resources into creating German navy large enough to antagonize Britain, but not defeat it. In 1911, Chancellor Theobald von Bethmann-Hollweg, a notched defeat leading to the Rüstungswende or armaments turning point, that's translated from a German, when he switched expeditor from the navy to the army. This decision was not driven by the reduction in political tensions, but German concerns over Russia's quick recovery from its defeat in the Russian-Japanese War and subsequent 1905 Russian Revolution, that's the same year. Economic reforms backed by funding from the French led to significant post-1908 expansion of railways and transportation infrastructure, particularly in its western border regions. Since Germany and Austria-Hungary really relied on the faster mobilizations to compensate for their numerical inferiority compared to Russia, the threat posted by the closing of this gap was more important than competing with the Royal Navy. After Germany expanded its standing army by 170,000 troops in 1913, France extended compulsory military service from 2 to 3 years. Similar measures were taken by the Balkan powers and Italy, which led to increased expedition by the Ottomans and Austria-Hungary. And Ottomans, that's Turkish, Turkey. Absolute figures are hard to calculate due to differences in categorizing expedition, since they often omit civilian infrastructure projects like railways, which also had logistical importance and military use. It is known, however, that from 1908 to 1913, military spending by the six major European marked by series of crises in the Balkans as other powers sought to benefit from Ottoman decline. While Pan-Slavic and Orthodox Russia considered itself the protector of Serbia and other Slav states, they preferred the strategically vital Bosporus Straits to be controlled by a weak Ottoman government, rather than some ambitious Slav power like Bulgaria. Since Russia had its own ambitions in northern Anatolia, and their clients had overlapping claims in the Balkans, balancing these divided by Russia policymakers and added to regional instability. Austrian statesmen viewed the Balkans as essential for the continued existence of their empire, and saw Serbian expansion as a direct threat. The 1908 to 1909 Bosnian crisis began when Austria annexed the former Ottoman territory of Bosnia and Herzegovina, which it had occupied since 1878, time to coincide with the Bulgarian Declaration of Independence from the Ottoman Empire. This unilateral action was denounced by the European powers but accepted as there was no consensus on how to resolve the situation. So historians see this as a significant escalation ended by a chance of Austria cooperating with Russia in the Balkans while also damaging diplomatic relationships between Serbia and Italy. Both of whom had their own expansionist ambitions in the region. Tensions increased after the 1911 to 1912 Italo-Turkish War, demonstrated Ottoman weakness, and led for the formation of the Balkan League, an alliance of Serbia, Bulgaria, Montenegro, and Greece. The League quickly overran most of the Ottoman territory in the Balkans during the 1912 to 1913 First Balkan War. Much to the surprise of outside observers, the Serbian capture of ports on the Adriatic resulted in partial Austrian mobilization starting on 21st November 1912, including units along the Russian border in Galicia. Galicia now that's currently some territories in Poland and Ukraine. In a meeting the next day, the Russian government decided not to mobilize in response, unwilling to participate in a war for which they were not as of yet prepared to handle. As we were talking before, Russia wasn't prepared for it, to be honest. The Great Powers sought to reassert control thoughts on 1913's Treaty of London, which created an independence of Albania, while enlarging the territories of Bulgaria, Serbia, Montenegro, and Greece. However, disputes between the victors sparked the 33-day Second Balkan War, when Bulgaria attacked Serbia and Greece on 16 June 1913. It was defeated, losing most of Macedonia to Serbia and Greece, and southern Dobruja to Romania. The result was that even countries which benefited from the Balkan War, such as Serbia and Greece, felt cheated of their rightful gains, while for Austria it demonstrated the apparent indifference with which other powers viewed their concerns, including Germany. This complex mix of resentment, nationalism, and insecurity helps explain why the pre-1914 Balkans became known as the powder keg of Europe. So let's talk about prelude of what may lead to the actual fight and the war. And on the 28th June 1914, Franz Ferdinand of Austria, heir presumptive to Emperor Franz Joseph, visited Sarajevo, capital of the recently annexed provinces of Bosnia and Herzegovina. 6 assassins from the movement known as Young Bosnia or Mlada Bosnia took up positions along the road taken by the Archduke's motorcade with the intention of assassinating him, supplied with the arms by extremists with the Serbian Black Hand intelligence organizations. They hoped his death would free Bosnia from Austrian rule, although there was little agreement on what would replace it. Nedejko Sabrinovic threw a grenade at the Archduke's car and injured 2 of his aides, who were taken to the hospital while the convoy carried on. The other assassins were also unsuccessful, but an hour later, as Ferdinand was returning from visiting the injured officers, his car took a wrong turn into a street where Gavrilo Princip was standing. He stepped forward and fired 2 pistol shots, fatally wounding Ferdinand and his wife Sophie, who both died shortly thereafter. Although Emperor Franz Joseph was shocked by the incident, political and personal differences mean the 2 men were not close. Allegedly, his first reporter commented as a high power has re-established the order which I, alas, could not preserve. According to historian Zbigniew Zeman, his reaction was reflected more broadly in Vienna, where the event almost failed to make any impression whatsoever. On 28th and 29th June, the crowds listened to music and drank wine as if nothing had happened. Nevertheless, the impact of the murder of the to the throne was significant and has been described by historical Christopher Clark as a 9/11 effect, a terrorist event charged with historical meaning, transforming the politician chemistry in Vienna. And you can see the picture of traditionally thought to show the arrest of guerrilla principle. This photo is now believed by historians to depict an innocent bystander, Ferdinand Becher, and it's really unbelievable, but they could take pictures at this time, like more than 100 years ago. And some about expansion of violence in Bosnia and Herzegovina. The Austro-Hungarian authorities encouraged the subsequent anti-Serb riots in Sarajevo, in which Bosnian Croats and Bosniaks killed the Bosnian Serbs and damaged numerous Serb-owned buildings. Violent actions against ethnic Serbs were also organized outside Sarajevo in the cities in Austro-Hungary-controlled Bosnia and Herzegovina, Croatia, and also as well Slovenia. Austro-Hungarian authorities in Bosnia and Herzegovina imprisoned and extradited approx 5.5k prominent Serbs, from 700 to 2k of whom died in prison. A further 416 Serbs were sentenced to death. Predominantly Bosniak special militia known as the Schutzkorps was established and carried out the persecutions of Serbs. The other next part of the World War I is the July crisis. The association initiated the July crisis, a month of diplomatic maneuvering between Austria-Hungary, Germany, Russia, France, and Britain. Believing Serbian intelligence helped organize Franz Ferdinand's murder, Austrian officials wanted to use the opportunity to end their interference in Bosnia and saw the war as the best way of achieving this. However, the foreign ministry had no solid proof of Serbian involvement and a dossier used to make its case was riddled with errors. On 23rd July, Austria delivered an ultimatum to Serbia, listing 10 demands made internationally unacceptable to provide an excuse for starting hostilities. Serbia ordered general mobilization on 25th July, but accepted all the terms except for those empowering Austrian representatives to suppress subversive elements inside Serbia and take part into the investigation and trial of Serbians linked to the assassination. Claiming this amounted to rejection, Austria broke off diplomatic relations and ordered partial mobilization the next day. On 28th July, they declared war on Serbia and began shelling Belgrade, having initiated war preparation on 25th July. Russia now ordered general mobilization in support of Serbia on 30th. Anxious to ensure backing from the SPD political opposition by presenting Russia as the aggressor, German Chancellor Bethmann-Hollweg delayed commencement of the war preparation until 31st July. The afternoon, the Russian government were handed a note requiring them to cease all war measures against Germany and Austria-Hungary within 12 hours. A further German demand for neutrality was refused by the French, who ordered general mobilization, but delayed declaring war. The German general staff had long assumed they forced a war onto two fronts. The Schiffen plan investigated using 80% of the army to defeat France in the west, then switched to Russia. Since this required them to move quickly, mobilization orders were issued that afternoon. At the meeting on 29th July, the British cabinet had narrowly declined its obligations to Belgium under the 1839 Treaty of London, did not require it to oppose a German invasion with military force. However, this was largely driven by Prime Minister Oswald's desire to maintain unity. He and his senior cabinet ministers were already committed to support France. The Royal Navy had been mobilized. The British Army, Royal Navy, had been mobilized, and public opinion was strongly in favor of intervention. On 31st July, Britain sent notes to Germany and France asking them to respect Belgian neutrality. France pledged to do so. Germany did not reply. Once the German ultimatum to Russia expired on the morning of 1st August, the two countries were at war. Later at the same day, Wilhelm was informed by his ambassador in London, Prince Lichnowsky, that Britain would remain neutral if France was not attacked, and might not intervene at all given the ongoing home rule crisis in Ireland. Jubilant at this news, he ordered General Moltke, the German chief of staff, to march the whole of the army to the east. This allegedly brought Moltke to the verge of a nervous breakdown. Was protested that it cannot be done. The deployment of millions cannot be improvised. Lichnowsky soon realized he was mistaken, although Wilhelm insisted on waiting for a telegram from his cousin George V. Once received, it confirmed that there had been a misunderstanding, and he told Moltke, "Now do what you want." Aware of German plans to attack through Belgium, French commander-in-chief Joseph Joffre asked his government to permission to cross the border and preempt such a move. To avoid a violation of Belgian neutrality, he was told any advance would come only after a German invasion. On the 2nd August, Germany occupied Luxembourg and exchanged fire with the French units. On 3rd August, they declared war on France and demanded free passage across Belgium, which was refused. Early on the morning of 4th August, the Germans invaded, and Albert I of Belgium called for assistance under the Treaty of London. Britain sent Germany an ultimatum demanding they withdraw from Germany, but when this expired at midnight without a response, the two empires were at war. So that's just a short involving in what happened during these first years of war and how it led to what happened. Unfortunately, the Germany wanted to invade France because they had a border between them on a very rich lands where they could have lots of gas and other natural resources, and it just couldn't stop Germany from invading France or bordering Luxembourg to have more power in this region, have more money, and develop their military, and then in the future have more power. And so now let's talk about some of progress of the war. So confusion among the Central Powers. The strategy of the Central Powers suffered from miscommunication, as we talked about it before. They just didn't understand each other in some cases, and this just led to catastrophic situations. And Germany had promised to support Austria-Hungary's invasion of Serbia, but interpretations of what this meant differed. Previously tested deployment plans had been replaced early in 1914s, but those had never been tested in exercises. Austro-Hungarian leaders believed Germany would cover its northern flank against Russia. Serbian campaign began on 12th August, and the Austria and Serbs clashed at the battles at the Ther and Kolubara. Over the next 2 weeks, Austrian attacks were repulsed with heavy losses, dashing their hopes of a swift victory and marking the first major Allied victories of the war. As a result, Austria had to keep sizable forces on the Serbian front, weakening its efforts against Russia. Serbian defeat on the 1914 invasion has been called one of the major upset victories of the 20th century. In spring 1915, the campaign saw the first use of anti-aircraft warfare, after an Austrian plane was shot down with a ground-to-air fire, as well as the first medical evacuation by the Serbian army in autumn 1915. Something about German offensive in Belgium and France. So, upon mobilization in 1914, 18% of German army was located on the Western Front, with the remainder acting as a screening force in the east. Officially, Tail's Aufmarsch Second West is better known as the Schlieffenplan. After its creation, Alfred von Schlieffen head to the German General Staff from 1891 to 1906. Rather than a direct attack across their shared frontier, the German right wing would sweep through the Netherlands and Belgium, then swing south, encircling Paris and trapping the French army of France, against the Swiss border. Schlieffen estimated this would take 6 weeks, after which the German army would transfer to the east and defend the Russians. The plan was substantially modified by his successor Helmut von Moltke the Younger. Under Schlieffen 85 of Germany forces in the west were assigned to the right wing, with the remainder holding along the frontier. By keeping his left wing deliberately weak, he hoped to lure the French into an offensive into the lost provinces of Alsace-Lorraine, which been occupied, if you remember, which was in fact the strategy investigated by the Plan 17. However, Moltke grew concerned the French might push too hard on his left flank, as the German army increased in size from 1908 to 1914. He changed the allocations of forces between two wings from 85 to 15 and changed the allocations to 70-30. It means they send more army to the east. He also considered Dutch neutrality essential to German trade and cancelled the incursion into the Netherlands, which meant any delays in Belgium threatened the entire viability of the plan. Historian Richard Holmes argues these changes mean the right wing was not strong enough to achieve decisive success, and thus led to unrealistic goals and timings. The initial German advance in the west was very successful, and by the end of August, the Allied left, which included the British Expeditionary Force, BAF, could be named like this, was in full threat. At the same time, the French offensive in Alsace-Lorraine was a disastrous failure, with casualties exceeding 260,000, including 27,000 killed on 22nd August during the Battle of the Frontiers. German planning provides broad strategic instructions while allowing army commanders considerable freedom in carrying them out at the front. This worked well in 1866 and 1870s, but in the 1914s, von Clark used this freedom to disobey orders, opening a gap between the German armies as they closed on Paris. In 1911, the Russian Stavka had agreed with the French to attack Germany within 15 days of mobilizations. 10 days before, the Germans had anticipated, although it meant the Russian army that entered East Prussia, uh, Empire of Germany, on the 17th August, did so without many of their support elements. By the end of 1914, German troops held strong defensive positions inside France, controlled the bulk of France's domestic coal fields, and had inflicted 230,000 more casualties than it lost itself. However, communications problems and questionable command decisions cost Germany the chance of decisive outcome, while it had failed to achieve the primary objective of avoiding a long two-front war. As was apparent to a number of German leaders, this amounted to a strategic defeat. Shortly after the Marne Crown Prince Wilhelm told an American reporter, "We have lost the war. It will go on for a long time, but lost it is already." And so I think mostly you heard about Europe, and but the war happened only in Europe. Most battles and the most impactable battles were in Europe, but also some battles happened in Asia and Pacific. On the 13th August 1914, New Zealand occupied German Samoa, now the independent state of Samoa. On 11th September, the Austrian naval and military expeditionary force landed on the island of New Britain, then part of German New Guinea. On 28th October, the German cruiser SMS Emden sunk the Russian cruiser Zemchuk in the Battle of Penang. Japan declared war on Germany prior to seizing territories in the Pacific, which later became the South Seas Mandate, as well as German's treaty ports on the Chinese Shandong Peninsula at Tsingtao. After Vienna refused to withdraw its cruiser SMS Kaiserin Elizabeth from Tsingtao, Japan declared war on Austria-Hungary as well, and the ship was sunk at Tsingtao in November 1914. Within a few months, Allied forces had seized all German territories in the Pacific, leaving only isolated commerce raiders and a few holdouts in New Guinea. Also, some of the battles happened in Africa, and they called as African campaigns. Some of the first clashes of the war involved British, French, and German colonial forces in Africa. On 6 to 7 August, French and British troops invaded the German protectorate of Togoland and Cameroon. On 10th August, German forces in Southwest Africa attacked South Africa. Sporadic and fierce fighting continued for the rest of the war on these territories. The German colonial forces in German East Africa, led by Colonel Paul von Lettow-Warburg, fought a guerrilla warfare campaign during World War I, and only surrendered 2 weeks after the armistice took effect in Europe. And also, as we know, India, a long time ago, it was a British Empire, so some war happened and affected India as well, and that's called the Indian support for the Allies. Prior the war, Germany had attempted to use Indian nationalism and pan-Islamism to its advantage, and a policy continued to post-1914 by instigating uprising in India, while the Niedermeyer-Hentig expedition urged Afghanistan to join the war on the side of Central Powers. However, contrary to British fears of a revolt in India, the outbreak of the war saw a reduction in nationalist activity. This was largely because leaders from the Indian National Congress and other groups believed support for the British war effort would hasten Indian Home Rule, a promise allegedly made explicit in 1917 by Edwin Montagu, then Secretary of State for India. In 1914, the British Indian Army was larger than the British Army itself. And between 1914 and 1918, an estimated 1.3 million Indian soldiers and laborers served in Europe, Africa, and the Middle East, while the government of India and their princely allies supplied large quantities of food, money, and ammunition. In all, 140,000 soldiers served on the Western Front and nearly 700,000 in the Middle East, with 47 estimated 47,746 killed and 65,128 wounded. The suffering engendered by the war, as well as the failure of the British government to grant self-government to India after the end of hostilities, bred disillusionment and resulted in the campaign for full independence led by Mahatma Gandhi. Let's talk now about the Western Front from 1914 to 1916. Western Front, that's Britain, could be states, France, Germany. Pre-war military tactics that emphasized open warfare and the individual rifleman proved obsolete when they controlled with the conditions prevailing in 1914. Technological advances allowed the creation of strong defensive systems, largely improved to massed infantry advances such as barbed wire, machine guns, and above all, more powerful artillery, which dominated the battlefield and made crossing open ground extremely difficult. Both sides struggled to develop tactics for breaching entrenched positions without suffering heavy casualties. In time, however, technologies enabled to the production of new offensive weapons, such as gas warfare and the tank. After the First Battle of the Marne in September 1914, Allied and German forces unsuccessfully tried to outflank each other, a series of maneuvers later known as the Race to the Sea. By the end of 1914, the opposing forces confronted each other along an interrupted line of entrenched positions from the Channel to the Swiss border. Since the Germans were normally able to choose where to stand, they generally held the high ground, while their trenches tended to better built. Those constructed by the French and English were initially considered temporary, only needed until an offensive would smash the German defenses. Both sides considered temporary, only needed. First of all, both sides of this temporary building, it was quite unsuccessful. Germans had more power, as they could choose where they can stand or where they won't stand. So they chose only the highlands to control more territory, and anyway they lost it. Unfortunately, they just choose their own tactic. I mean, unfortunately for Germans. I'm not saying it on any of the sides. I just learn it and talk about it as a part of the history. So both sides tried to break this stalemate using scientific and technological advances. And on 22nd April 1915, at the Second Battle of Ypres, the Germans used chlorine gas for the first time on the Western Front. Several types of gas soon became widely used by both sides, and though it never proved a decisive battle-winning weapon, it became one of the most feared and best remembered horrors of the war. So, as we can see, these conflicts and the war created lots of weapons that can be used even at our time nowadays, and it's so so sad that people could invent this just to uh, make other people die, and it just creates it just creates lots of pain for other people. But what they did, it didn't help them. They just made other people die in the pain and suffer from chlorine gas. And next part of it is continuation of the French warfare. So in February 1916, the German attacked French defensive position at the Battle of Verdun, lasting until December 1916. The German made initial gains before French counter-attacks returned measures to near their standing point. Casualties were greater for the French, but the Germans bled heavily as well, with anywhere from 700,000 to 975,000 casualties suffered between the two combatants. Verdun became a symbol of French determination and self-sacrifice. The Battle of the Somme was an Anglo-French offensive of July to November 1916. The opening day on 1st July 1916 was the with 200,000 French and 500,000 German. Gunfire was not the only factor taking lives. The diseases that emerged in the trenches were a major killer on both sides. The living conditions made it so that countless diseases and infections occurred, such as trench foot, shell shock, blindness, burns from mustard gas, lice, trench fever, cooties, that's a body lice, and the Spanish flu. Naval war. At the start of the war, German cruisers were scattered across the globe, some of which were subsequently used to attack Allied merchant shipping. The British Royal Navy systematically hunted them down, though not without the same embarrassment from its inability to protect Allied shipping. For example, the light cruiser SMS Emden, which was part of the German East Asia Squadron stationed at Qingdao, seized or sunk 15 merchantmen, as well as a Russian cruiser and a French destroyer. Most of the squadron was returned to Germany when it sank two British armored cruisers at the Battle of Cornwall in November 1914. Before being virtually destroyed at the Battle of the Falklands Islands in December. The SMS Dresden escaped with a few auxiliaries, but after the Battle of Mass Tierra, these two had either been destroyed or interned. So by the end, I want to talk about a little bit about aftermath, so what happened after, and the formal end of the war. And the formal state of the war between the sides persisted for another 7 months until the signing of the Treaty of Versailles with Germany on June 28, 1919. The United States Senate did not ratify the treaty despite public support for it, and did not formally end its involvement in the war until the Knox-Porter Resolution was signed on 2nd July 1921 by President Warren G. Harding. For the United Kingdom and the British Empire, the state of war ceased under the provisions of the Termination of the Present War Act 1918 with respect to Germany, Austria, Bulgaria, Hungary, and Turkey. Turkey, as we know, was named as Ottoman Empire before, so do not get wrong about it. Some war memorials state the end of the war as being when the Versailles Treaty was signed in 1919, which was when many of the troops serving abroad finally returned home. By contrast, most commemorations of the war and concentrate on the armistice of November 11th, 1918. So the actual peace treaties and national boundaries as another topics of the aftermath. So after the war, there grew a certain amount of academic focus on the causes of war and on the elements that could make peace flourish. The central powers The central powers had to acknowledge responsibility for all the loss and damage to which the allied and associated governments and their nations have been subjected as a consequence of the war imposed upon them by their aggression. In the Treaty of Versailles, this statement was Article 231. This article became known as the War Guilt Clause, as a majority of Germans felt humiliated and resentful. Overall, the Germans felt they had been unjustly dealt with what they called the Diktat of Versailles. German historian Hans Scholz said the treaty placed Germany under legal sanctions, deprived of military power, economically ruined, and politically humiliated. Belgian historical Lawrence van Uppersel emphasizes the central role played by the memory of the war and the Versailles Treaty in German politics in 1920s and 1930s. So, our next topic of discussion is going to be World War II, because as I said at the start of this video, World War One led to the World War II, unfortunately, and I've talked about some parts in general about what happened, but that's a massive topic for discussion, and I think we will never have enough time on a YouTube video to discuss everything what happened. If you're really interested in it, you can learn more from books or topics on the internet, but I think the books is the most powerful information that you can learn about this part of the history. So as a result, what happened? The Germany lost their economy. Lots of people died. Unresolved conflicts, and they just stopped the fighting because of their weakness. This was continued for 4 years, and this just unsuccessful battles make them run out of everything they had, and they just must end it. And I think we still, in our world, we still suffer from the conflicts that haven't been finished during these times. So it is important to mention that about 60 million European military were mobilized. So and they say that about 8 millions were killed, 7 millions were permanently disabled, and 15 millions were seriously injured. So it affected on the whole all European nations what happened, because mostly these people just ruined their lives because of these conflicts. And Germany lost about 15.1% of its active male population. Austria-Hungary lost 17.1% of active male population, and France lost 10.5%. So let's and just a little bit about the war crimes. They used chemical weapons, genocides. They had a lot of prisoners of the war, and 25 to 31% of Russian losses uh, were to prisoner status. For Austria-Hungary, it was 32%, for Italy 26%, for France 12%, for Germany 9%, and finally Britain the lowest percent was 7%. And prisoners from the Allied armies totaled about 1.4 million. That's not including Russia. From the Central Powers, about 3.3 million soldiers became prisoners, for most of them surrendered to Russians. So, as we know, war can bring only misery and no any happiness, unfortunately. Fortunately, that's I hope that we will not see that much war in our nowadays world, because that's bringing only the misery.